It's on now, you
That's
see.
on now. Right.
There you go.
Good morning, members. Would you please take your seats? Thank you. First, for the health and safety reason, fire exit instructions have been distributed around the chambers in the public gallery for the informations. Please make sure you are familiar with them. Should it be necessary to evacuate the chambers as the result of the fire alarm, you should make your way to the nearest available exit and assemble in the Great Hall courtyard. A member of the staff will be on hand to assist people in the public gallery to exit the building. If the evacuation is required for reason other than the fire alarm, you will be given specific instructions as to action required. We are not expecting a fire drill today. Please, would you ensure all the phones are turned to silent? Now, I welcome to our priest this morning, Mr. Peer Jada Qureshi, who is going to say the prayer for this council this morning. Thank you. Mr. Qureshi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to God, the Lord of the worlds. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Maliki Yawmiddin, Master of the Day of the Judgment. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Only Allah, God, do we worship, and of Thee only do we seek the help. Ihdina as-sirat wal mustaqim. Guide us on the straight path. Sirat wallazina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. For those upon whom this has been bestowed, the bounties and the path of those inflicted with thy wrath, none of us who do righteous should go astray. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. This is the first time that a Muslim has spoken during the opening of the chamber in Hampshire County Council, I'm told, by Mr. Chaudhry. So I think I should take this opportunity just to say one concept linked to this prayer. Baraka is an Islamic concept, and it means to gain a lot out of a little, or to take the most beneficent out of a lot. So, for example, he can place baraka in time. So when I'm racing against the clock, he allows me to be super productive. He can place baraka in wealth, in money. So even when I don't have much, I manage to do a lot when I turn to others. He can place baraka in studies and work, so the output is a lot more than the input. He can even place barakah in energy. So with little fuel, for example, I can do a lot. Barakah is everywhere, alhamdulillah. And I would encourage all of the members here, elected members, in unity, to think of barakah. Think of the maximum that you can get from the minimum. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Qureshi. Be seated, please. Thank you. Mr. Qureshi, thank you very much for your prayer. If you wish to remain, observe the rest of the council meeting, by all means. If not, thank you very much indeed for your attendance. Thank you. His apologies. Debbie, please, could you?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillors Graham Burgess, Adam Carew, Christopher Carter, Wayne Irish, Rupert Curl, Kirsty North, Stephen Reid, Elaine Still, Bruce Tennant, Mike Thornton, Jan Warwick, and Bill Withers, and from Honorary Alderman Fryn Dickens, Felicity Heinson, and Marilyn Tucker. And also just to note, please, members, that Councillor House is going to be joining us a little later this morning due to urgent medical treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Item 2.
Further apology.
Oh, further apology.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Can I just add the apologies for Councillor Roland Dibbs as well, please?
I'm sure that will be noted. Thank you. I have to read to you all that. It's a long list of the things. Members, you have received the Monetary Officer email of 5th of November regarding item 9 on today's agenda, the medium-term financial strategy update and transformation to 2021 saving proposal. Under the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct, a member has a personal interest in an item of business if inter alia it relates to or is likely to affect another public body of which he or she is a member. In such case, the member's code of conduct requires the interest to be disclosed at the meeting at which is considered. The advice from the monetary officer is that this would apply, therefore, in relation to MTFS as the regards member who are twin hatters. Chief Executive will name and ask all those members who had twin-hatted to confirm collectively that they wish their membership of another local authority to be declared as a person interest in regard to the MTFS item. Any individual members who wish to declare individually for whatever the reason may be, of course, do so. There will then follow an opportunity for a member to declare any other interest in relation to MTFS item. Such members of any other public authority, outside body, any other disclosable pecuniary interest or personal interest or matters on the agenda in the usual way. Now I'm going to invite the Chief Executive to read the names of the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate, members, I'm going to read through a list of the members who are also members of other local authorities that may be implicated by the medium-term financial strategy. This is just a practical ease of process, and the assumption would be that those names of members have a declaration of interest declared. So it's Councillor John Bennison, Fred Burkitt, Jackie Branson, Zilia Brooks, Graham Burgess, Adam Carew, Fran Carpenter, Christopher Carter, Peter Chegwin, Charles Chowdhury, Daniel Clark, Adrian Collett, Rod Cooper, Mark Cooper, Tonya Craig, Alan Dowden, Keith Evans, Steve Forster, Jane Frankham, Jonathan Glenn, Judith Grajewski, David Harrison, Edward Heron, Dominic Hiscock, Keith House, Gary Hughes, Robert Humby, Wayne Irish, Gavin James, David Keast, Rupert Curl, Alexis McAvoy, Robert McAtter, Kirsty North, Russell Oppenheimer, Neville Penman, Stephen Philpott, Jackie Porter, Roger Price, David Simpson, Elaine Still, Bruce Tennant, Michael Thierry, Martin Todd, Malcolm Wade, Michael Westbrook and Sean Woodward. So by reading that list, so that list assumes declarations of interest with regards to Twin Hatter responsibilities. Anybody on that list who has a further declaration to make may do so, or anybody who wishes to make a separate comment may do so also. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Westbrook, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just my wife's also a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Thank you. Councillor Collett, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed a couple of names there of people who used to be members of the District Council but are not. And my name may have been included in that category, but I do need to declare that I am a member of Yakeley Town Council and chair of Blackwater and Hawley Town Council, both of whom will be affected by the withdrawal of funding for the Lengtsman scheme and other items that are in the MTFS package coming forward today. So I think parish councillors maybe need to consider their position too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mel Kendall, please.
Yes, Chairman, I need to declare an interest in that I am authority member of the New Forest National Park, who will be affected by some of the decisions we'll be taking today. But in any event, on that particular item, as is the normal practice, I will be abstaining during the vote as Vice Chairman, unless, of course, I realise that the vote is going to be a tie, in which case I would reserve my right to vote.
Councillor Rothschild, please.
Thank you. I also need to declare an interest. My father is a member of Rushmore Borough Council.
Thank you. Councillor Stellard.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up Councillor Collett's point, it may not be necessary, but nevertheless I'll declare that I am a member of Southwark Parish Council.
Thank you. Councillor Edward, please.
Member of New Forest National Park Authority, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jonathan Glenn, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a double hatter anymore, although I'm very flattered that this council may think I am, okay? But I'm still going to declare an interest in particular, and I won't involve myself in the debate, the issue with Robert May School. But I declare an interest in that.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Mann, please.
I'd like to declare an interest as an authority member of the New Forest National Park Authority.
Councillor, what's his name?
Sorry, my son is also a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Chair, there are two people over this side trying to signal to you and have been for a long time.
Councillor Neville Pinman, please. Thank you.
We'll come back to you.
Yep. Councillor Harris, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Just covering all bases, I'm a member of New Forest National Park Authority and Totton and Ealing Town Council, as well as New Forest District Council.
Councillor Russell Hopran, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a member of the South Downs National Park Authority. Thank you.
I think Councillor Neville Pinman wants to come back. Councillor McArthur, please.
I also have to declare that I'm a member of the South Downs National Park Authority.
Oh my God, this is started again. Councillor Anne Briggs, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Vice Chair of Chichester Harbour Conservancy, and my husband is also a member of Havant Borough Council.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Chairman of Highbury Parish Council, and we are entering in a contractual arrangement with Hampshire County Council in the near future.
Councillor Dowden, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My wife is a member of Test Valley Borough Council and chair the Valley Park Parish Council, and everybody in this room today has got an interest, so I think we should just declare everybody's got an interest.
Who is there?
I don't see anybody else. I think that's it.
No,
Oh,
no,
hang on,
there's-
there's
what's her name?
Oh, there's Councillor Mrs. Becky Porter.
Thank you. I'm going to do it for as being a trustee and in some cases the chairman of trustees. I don't know if you want to declare these, but actually we have received grants from Hampshire County Council, so I think it probably needs to be said at this point, but it is also on my register of interests.
Members, I think everybody has declared interest. My daughter is a councillor in Rushborough Council, and I'm the councillor there as well. So as I'm doing the exercise, I should do the same thing. Thank you.
Todd.
Yes, I'm Chief Executive of the Men's Health Forum, which is a charity which has done work with Hampshire County Council in the past.
Thank you.
Councillor McAvoy.
And current.
I guess as everybody's asked it, I better say I'm Vice Chairman of the Southern Inshore Fisheries Conservation Authority.
Thank you. I think we should move on now. I think, oh, there's some...
more.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm a trustee of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Community Foundation. I'm not sure there is an interest, but I think I ought to mention it just in case.
Thank you very much indeed. That's enough, I think. Item 3 on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 18th of July 2019. I'm sure that you read all the minutes. If you're in agreement, I can sign the papers. Thank you. Now, we had the extraordinary meeting held on the 23rd of September 2019. You agree that I signed the papers? Thank Hampshire?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to speak today because I wish to address Hampshire County Council's position on plastic recycling. Currently, Hampshire County Council is only able to take on 2 types of plastic bottles, polymers, PET and HDPE. However, plastic pots, tubs and trays, PTT, which have more complex polymers, cannot successfully be sorted in our MRFs, the materials recovery facilities. The reasons given on the Hampshire County Council's websites are that the new equipment is prohibitively expensive and that there is currently no viable market for over half of the plastic tubs and trays which they could collect. There are issues with contamination and sorting not being 100% accurate. It's worth noting that 79% of the UK's local authorities accept mixed plastics. 60% of the UK's local authorities collect mixed plastics as part of curbside collection, and an additional 12 local authorities reported that they will be adding PTT to their curbside collections. Locally, Somerset County Councils accept PTTs at their recycling plants, and they say they'll be adding this to their curbside collection service in 2020. Dorset County Council and Wiltshire County Council, respectively, both collect PTTs at curbside collection. In the southwest, we are anomalous in our resistance to this initiative. In the meantime, Hampshire County Council instead considers that the most sustainable disposal option for mixed plastics, other than bottles, is to recover energy from them, to produce electricity to power thousands of homes each year, and to reduce waste going to landfill. Of course, we should endeavour to prevent waste going to landfill. However, this is a relatively outdated initiative, and we must consider the impact of energy recovery on the environment. Energy recovery uses thermal treatment, aka incineration. The 3 sites, Portsmouth, Chinham and Marchwood, emit harmful gases through incineration, total organic carbon, which causes harm to human health, damages crops and contributes to global warming. Sulfur dioxide causes acid rain, damages crops and forestry. Nitrogen oxides, which are greenhouse gases, which can cause health hazards, deplete ozone layer and cause acid rain. Carbon monoxide, the hazards of which we're all familiar with. Veolia have told me that they publish their emissions data monthly for Hampshire's 3 facilities, though rather worryingly, there's no data since March 2019 for both Chinham and Marchwood on their site. Elsewhere, councils have extended the types of plastics that they can sort. using specialist machinery that use 12 optical sorters to sort mixed mass plastics. Some of these were instated 10 years ago. When I explained our situation to these councils, they explained that the price of energy recovery is very high, much higher than recycling and selling and for landfill. I'd be most interested to see how much our energy recovery facilities spend each year on incineration. It's also been highlighted to me that there are no viable markets for virgin plastic, but the RAP 2019 report explained that while there'll be greater competition for recycled plastic through the loss of traditional export markets, domestic recycling must and will increase in order to meet stretching targets. Investment in increased plastics recycling infrastructure is taking place, to be able to cope with economic volatility and be adaptable to changes in market need. This was very much in line with what was said by those on the ground working for the facilities responsible for waste management and councils already recycling mixed plastics. They are seeing an increase in viable markets for plastic, certainly not a lack of. Last, it's worth pointing out that it's in no way does this need to be a case of either or. DEFRA do believe that energy recovery ranks lower than prevention, reuse and recycling in their hierarchy, but that realistically, energy from waste must at the very least not compete with recycling, reuse and prevention, and should ideally support them. Further, that there is nothing in the legislation that says accepting waste from another council, city or region is a bad thing. And indeed, in many cases, it may be the best economic and environmental solution. Is sharing this responsibility with another local authority something you'd consider? Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much indeed. If you wish to observe the meeting, rest of the meeting by all means, and one of the officers will guide you to be seated somewhere in the public gallery. Thank you. Michael Gray and Mike Hayward from the Oakwood Road Resident Association regarding the Oulton Town Centre 20-mile zone. Both of you got 10 minutes. You can share 5 and 5 or 3 and 7, whatever the case may be. And after you finish speaking to us, you can remain sitting in our council if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Mike Gray, Chairman of the Ackender Road Residents Association in Oulton, as you've said, but on this occasion also speaking on behalf of several hundred other people living in a well-defined family of residential roads lying immediately west of Oulton Town Centre and contiguous with an existing 20-mile-per-hour zone. I'm joined by Mike Hayward, a committee member who will also be speaking, and by our Secretary, Rosie Hayward, and a resident of a neighbouring road, Nancy Clark, who are in the public gallery. Our purpose is to present you with a petition signed by over 600 people, representing virtually all the households we approached. It is a request that the existing Oulton Town Centre 20-mile-per-hour zone, last extended in 2016, be further extended to include our roads. Only a dozen households refused to sign, and that, I think, was because of an antipathy to petitioning, or maybe petitioners, rather than to 20 miles per hour. That existing zone already encroaches by a tantalizing 12 metres into Ackender Road, giving entirely the wrong and illogical message that it is acceptable for drivers to speed up as they approach Oulton's most populous residential road, far less suited to 30 miles per hour than the road they have just left. We gathered our signatures door to door. What impressed was the immediate and genuine enthusiasm that greeted us. We have a mix of terraces, semis, flats, large detached houses. Our support has come from people of all generations and walks of life, and all imaginable political persuasions. 20 miles per hour in residential roads is an idea whose time has come. We are aware of the DFT guidance on 20 mile per hour limits and zones, and the expectation that over time all significant residential areas will be covered. We are also aware of your policy statements of 2014 and 2016 and what you decided to do about some pilot schemes in 2018. We welcome the recent declaration by the County Council of a climate emergency, and your statement, quote, that in Hampshire this means not only building on our achievements on reducing carbon emissions, but also being absolutely clear on actions we can take to reduce our carbon footprint. We know that you keep your policy on speed limits under review, and we hope that you will carry out a further review in 2020 in the light of your statement and of growing public concern. And we ask that in particular you look again at the weighting you give to the various factors that the Department for Transport asks you to take into account, so that it isn't only accident statistics, but other things that affect people's health and well-being. The DFT guidelines, for example, refer to road geometry, the composition of the users of the roads, and road function. Mike Hayward will now give some further details.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Chairman, councillors. There are 4 important factors that are specific to our group of roads and which we, the residents, think make a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit highly appropriate. Firstly, our location. Surrounded on 3 sides by busy major routes, each of which is subject to congestion at various points and at various times of the day. The TRO prohibiting through traffic on this group of roads has, as we know from our repeated traffic counts of over 2 decades, been highly successful in limiting traffic increases. But we still experience significant levels of rat running. And rat runners, by definition, are racers. They are in a hurry. This is an unfortunate and unlawful function of 5 of our local roads. A second feature specific to Ackender Road and Queen's Road is that they are crossed by particularly heavily used pedestrian routes with shops, schools and a sixth form college to the east, and a community hospital, sports centre, another school, and a lot of housing to the west. They are also crossed by a national cycle network and local cycle path, which runs east-west across them and along 2 other of the roads in the block. At no point in any of these roads are there any formal pedestrian crossings, nor indeed any mid-carriageway pedestrian refuges. Thirdly, much of the housing in this area dates from the late 19th and early 20th century, with most houses, as photographs show, very close to the carriageway. This makes them and their occupants especially susceptible to the effects of traffic noise and air pollution. A number of occupants tell us that they have had to give up using their front bedrooms due to these very factors. Finally, and specific to Ackender Road, has been the recent development of 2 McCarthy and Stone housing developments. Along with the mix of family houses, this has greatly increased the number of vulnerable pedestrian road users. The elderly and the young, we know, are particularly vulnerable and benefit most from 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. But we all feel the need for protection. We know that 20-mile-an-hour limits are very popular, though perhaps even we were surprised by the overwhelming and enthusiastic support of local residents in signing this petition. We know that they do work to reduce average speeds, especially for the faster drivers. Additionally, the complex layout of our group of roads lends itself to self-enforcement, in that, due to the layout and permitted on-street parking, overtaking is simply not an option. If our 600 plus signatories themselves adhere to the limit, and very many of them on the doorstep voluntarily indicated that they would be doing so, then we can guarantee a considerable level of self-enforcement. Thank you, Chairman, for this, allowing us to bring this to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance. His chairman announcement. May I welcome on your behalf those aldermen who have graced us with their presence today. Thank you for your support. Members, you have received a list of engagement I have attended on your behalf. Especially, I attended one of the engagement was in Alton, which is a Brendan care home. I was really surprised to meet so many good people there and so much good work. And if any one of you interested and if you want to have a time to go and see the Brendan house, I think it's worth going and visiting those people. And the rest of the engagements, I think you got a copy of it. I don't want to go one by one or what I have done. Oh, my theme is the mental health and well-being. This conference held at the Ashburton Hall on World Mental Health Day, 10th of October, allowed us to discuss opportunity for collaboration and partnership to help promote better mental health, well-being, and stem the rise in the mental health, ill health across Hampshire. Hampshire County Council is now committed to Public Health England campaign to improve the nation's mental well-being. My special thanks to Councillor Graczewski, Councillor Stellard, and Councillor Fairest for their support, and to Simon Bryant and his team for organizing this event. Also, I had long service, one of the most rewarding of my tasks to host a reception to honor and congratulate the very many members of our staff who served us 25 years and 40 years. Members, I am sure you would like to join me in congratulating Councillor Christy North on the birth of her daughter, Eleanor Ivy May North, born on the 5th of October. We do hope mum and daughters are doing well. Lastly, may I just remind you that the Staff Act of Remembrance service takes place on Monday the 11th at 10:50 at War Memorial on Castle Avenue. Thank you, members. Item 6, leader report, please.
Chairman, councillors, it's been a busy few months. Councillor Perry warned me about all the extra emails, and there have been just a few. But I've more specifically spent a fair amount of my time at meetings involving the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, and specifically meeting up with the other leaders of the three unitaries at Portsmouth and elsewhere to discuss the various traffic problems that might have arose if we'd left the EU without a deal. I have to say that the four of us worked very well together. Despite the fact we came from different parties, there was clearly a common purpose to show that Hampshire and the two cities were well up to speed in terms of dealing with this possible contingency. A fact that was actually commented on by the new Secretary of State for Transport, who came to Portsmouth to see the actual problems on the ground and made the point that we were well ahead in this area of many other parts of the country, which is most gratifying. In addition, it was an opportunity to meet the new Secretary of State for Housing and Local Government in London, and I did make the point when I saw him that it was very important that his department understood the stress and strains we were under financially. I also took the opportunity during the summer to write twice to all our members of Parliament. First of all, asking them to make representations on our behalf to the Chancellor regarding the autumn statement. And secondly, after that statement had been announced, to make representations to the new Secretary of State for Housing and Local Government as to how his budget was to be split. I have had a number of communications back from both the members of Parliament in Hampshire and indeed ministers within the government, indicating the fact that our members have made those representations, and whilst we'd always like some more money, the fact is they did have an effect. We also had a meeting of all members of Parliament, and a number of them turned up where I could brief them on the medium-term financial strategy. I'd also like at this point to mention the fact that I've received a letter from the district and borough councils regarding waste and our proposals in the medium-term financial strategy about waste. We added an extra recommendation to the Cabinet's recommendations that were approved last month to cover some of the points they raised. And I very much look forward, together with my colleague, the Deputy Leader, in discussing how we can move forward as a county, including all the districts, to have a more streamlined service of waste management in our county. I'm certain that's what our constituents would like. And indeed, I think, as one of our deputations, one of the deputations this morning indicated, we do need to look very closely at how we can make it clearer to people exactly what plastic waste they can actually put in their refuse sacks and what they can't, and to find ways of ensuring that more plastic waste can be safely recycled or disposed of, rather than ending up in a rubbish pile in Malaysia, for instance. Moving on, I've had meetings with two Vice-Chancellors, the Vice-Chancellor of Winchester, and we are hoping to work more closely with that university in terms of our environmental initiatives, which will be mentioned later. And I also met the new Vice-Chancellor of Southampton University, Professor Mark Smith, and we signed a new joint working agreement with him, and I'm certain that we're going to have closer links with that university in the future. In addition, I've met the Chief Constable, the Chief Fire Officer, and the Managing Director of ABP. I've attended a number of events in the last few months. I would particularly like to pick out the Education Awards, the second year that we've done this, which was highly successful, and also the National Building Awards. We were very fortunate in what are called the Spaces National Awards. The LEAP Lookout was awarded a runner-up in the small build category. Robert May's Secondary School Extension was highly commended, and Whitchurch Silk Mill won the heritage where it won the heritage category, building a refurbishment of Charles Rennie's Mackintosh's Willow Tea Rooms in Glasgow, knocking it into second place. So I think that's quite an achievement. And I think all our teams, particularly the architects department, are to be congratulated in achieving these national awards. Finally, you'll note that I haven't indulged in any party political banter. Wait for it. I do not think this is the chamber to carry on the debate that is being carried on at the national level. All I'd say to everybody is when you get a chance, regardless of your party, to speak to the candidates at this general election, do make the point of the importance of social care. It is a subject that I find particularly concerning, that this is something that we've been asked to carry out by government under statute and has been continuously underfunded, whoever has been in power at the time. So do make that point. There is extra money going on into the health service. I would like to see at least a proportion of that money, or a larger proportion of that money, being spent on public health and on those areas which particularly affect the community. There should be a seamless road between healthcare and personal care and social care, and not a gap. So on that point, I do hope that you will feel it's right that we make those representations to all the candidates across Hampshire at the coming election. And on a slightly lighter note, amongst all the emails I received over the last few days, yesterday I received an email giving me the details of the Liberal Democrats' plan for a brighter future. When I pressed the print button on my printer, it came out like that. Yellow and a sort of orange colour. I thought for 1 minute that Councillor Harris had managed to hack into my computer, but I think the more likely thing that happened is I ran out. I think probably more likely I ran out of ink. And finally, not yet, if at all. If at all, if at all. And finally, I'd just like to add my own congratulations of those of the chairman to Kirsty and Phil North on the birth of their baby daughter. There is actually a card at the front here, just on the front desk. If any of you, indeed all of you, if you want to sign it, we'll make certain it gets off to them very shortly. And that ends my leader's address. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Item on the ordered paper is item 7, Question Understanding Order 1611. Now, I would like to invite Councillor Russell Oppenheimer to the question asked to the Leader. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Will the Leader advise what steps have been taken to take forward the recommendations on the environment contained in the Hampshire 2050 Commission report?
Leader, please.
In thanking Councillor Oppenheimer for that question, I'd say that following the Climate Emergency Declaration and the endorsement of the 2050 Commission's recommendations, work has been focused on progressing on the development of the Climate Change Strategy Action Plan as the key priority highlighted in the Commission's findings. The majority of the activity to date has focused on engaging with key partners and stakeholders in Hampshire to create the strategy and action plan to ensure that priorities, opportunities and gaps are identified and there is buy-in from the start. Meetings have been held with the district, borough and unitary partners and the wider public sector to discuss priorities, activities and joint working on climate change. A desire for sharing of tools and methodology has come on through strongly, and the priority areas of planning, transport, engaging with residents has also been identified. I think we're beginning to discover that this is a very wide subject. And one of the things we have to be particularly careful of, and I think it was mentioned in one of the delegations, is by carrying out one particular part of the strategy, you're not actually having an effect on some other part of the environment which was unintended. So the work has started. I will feed through at regular intervals, and my colleague, Councillor Warwick, and of course the Deputy Leader, the progress we've made on the ground. Because the one point I want to make again is when we signed up to the emergency, it wasn't just a matter of signing up to it. We wanted to find ways that we could actually make a difference on the ground.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the Leader for that answer. My supplementary question is about the 2050 Commissioner's recommendation to take full advantage of the natural environment to boost health and well-being. Would the Leader agree that green infrastructure, such as footpaths, canal paths and cycle paths, is important to getting more people out into the countryside to get those health benefits. So will we continue to work closely with our partners to enhance and extend our green infrastructure across the county?
Leader, please.
Yes, we will. In a way, we all know that when it comes to priorities, perhaps some of the things that Councillor Oppenheim, you've mentioned, get lost in terms of footpaths, in terms of better access on the foot and by bike into our national parks. So I think this is a very good point. And I think there's a public health element to this as well. And I think we must see how we can use both the funding that we have in ETE and public health funding to come up with some innovative schemes with our partners.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Stephen Philpott, to the Executive Member of the Commercial, Strategy, Human Resources and Performance. Would you ask the question, please? Thank you. That will be answered. Councillor Humby, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Philpott, for the question. Yes, I'm going to take Councillor Reid questions. He's actually very poorly with bronchitis, so he thought he was going to get it today, but unfortunately wasn't well enough to attend. So this was a question that an answer he prepared. Hampshire County Council recognised nearly a decade ago that climate change is one of the most pressing problems in our era, and that we should be doing all that we can within our power to help reduce the Council's impact. Green energy and energy-saving initiatives have therefore been a significant area of investment, with nearly £6 million invested in improvements since 2010. Since that point, the Council has made just over 43% reduction in carbon emissions through different initiatives, well on the way to meeting our target of 50% by 2025. This is good news for the climate, but also for our taxpayers. Cumulative savings in energy costs across the Council's whole operation and Hampshire schools has so far totalled more than £30 million. Carbon tax charges have also been reduced by £385,000 since the start of the programme. Initiatives that have contributed to the carbon reductions and savings have included a major ongoing programme of replacing building lights with LED alternatives, replacing the County Council's fleet of cars with electric vehicles, and you have seen a few press releases recently across several departments, fitting smart meters to all its buildings, including schools, to measure energy consumption and encourage switching off and behaviour change. I just wanted to add, he asked for this, that this is just the start. We have declared a climate emergency because there is much more that we need to do, and we are now making plans for the next stages of this journey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Any supplementary? Member for the Economy, Transport and Environment, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Humby, given that my question has been partly answered, would you prefer that I withdraw it or ask my supplementary question? Still ask the question, okay. Okay, fine. Can the Executive Member for Economy, Transport and Environment update the Council on progress with the County's Emerging Climate Change Action Plan and indicate how this aligns with the Government's target for carbon neutrality by 2050?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humby, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Carter, for the question. This gives me a chance to update the Council on progress with our work on climate change. In the time since the County Council endorsed the Cabinet decision to declare a climate emergency, we've been working hard to develop a comprehensive strategy and action plan. And I would just like to add at this point, Councillor Warwick is not in here today, she's given her apologies, because there was a big conference in London which she's attending today, which is Local Environment and Sustainability Conference, which I thought that should be attending. Now, clearly she was a bit between the two, but we thought it was right that she starts to attend all these conferences and actually starts to engage with all our partners as well. So that's why she isn't here today. The aim is to move Hampshire County Council and the wider county towards carbon neutrality and to develop effective and robust policies, programmes and above all engagement with local communities to deliver carbon reduction and greater resilience to climate impacts across Hampshire. One of our key early priority actions has been to engage fully and effectively with key partners and stakeholders in Hampshire to co-create a strategy and action plan to ensure that priorities are shared, opportunities and gaps are identified, and there is a wide buy-in to our approach from the outset. We can learn a lot from a huge range of organisations and specialist groups working in the field to develop best practice and ensure that we are creating a strategy and action plan that will be effective, relevant and locally owned and distinctive, which I think is very important. There is a huge amount of work going on within Hampshire, and it's also very important not to duplicate or develop our approach in isolation. There is a huge challenge in front of us all, and it is very important that we work together to tackle it effectively. We also recognise, of course, that to achieve real carbon neutrality and climate change mitigation, we need action at a national level as well. An interim update on progress with the strategy on action plan, alongside recommendations for some early actions, are due to be considered by Cabinet on the 10th of December. And I'm sure all members will be keenly interested to look at this and follow the Cabinet's discussions and deliberations at Cabinet. As you've heard in the answer from the previous question, so the County Council has been engaged with mitigating future climate change through successfully reducing carbon emissions on its own estate for a number of years. We have also been taking active steps to make Hampshire more resilient to the known impacts of climate change. But we are not complacent. We definitely recognise the urgency and importance of the issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hamby. Supplementary?
Thank you. What are the implications for Hampshire's waste and recycling services arising from the Government's Environment Bill? Thank you.
Councillor Hamby, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is a very good question and very relevant to the discussion and a lot of them in the MTF paper today. There was the waste strategy announced by the government and also the Environment Bill, and there are a multitude of recommendations there which we will need to address. And this will affect all local authorities, things like the deposit return scheme and the producer pays. So all these things have to be considered, and that's why I welcome the leader's announcement at the beginning that we do need to do this in partnership. So we need to sit down, have our discussions with all authorities right across Hampshire to see how we can address those issues. We all know that we need to improve our recycling rate, but we need to understand how we can do that working in partnership, and then we can set about where we need to invest tens of millions of pounds into new infrastructure to deal with that. So there will be an impact on all of us, but we need to understand how it affects all of us before we can make that investment in the infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hamby. Councillor Adam Crew, would you ask the question to the Executive Member for the Education and Skills? if...
He's here, carry on.
Okay.
I'm perfectly happy if Adam is happy with me doing so. I'll ask the question. It's a question to the Executive Member for Education and Skills. Will the Executive Member advise what progress has been made in completing the Oakmoor Secondary School in Whitehill and Borden, please?
Councillor Charter, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to answer my first question, actually, as the Executive Member. I'm delighted to say that the new Oakmoor Secondary School building in Whitehill and Borden is nearing completion. The Academy is currently in the process of moving from the Mill Chase site and will commence teaching in the new facility on the 11th of November 2019 as planned. The County Council has led the works to design, construct a new campus and relocate the school as part of the investment in Whitehill and Borden regeneration plan, for which there is a significant one-off capital investment of £10 million by the County Council. The balance of the £30 million funding includes contributions from the Whitehill and Borden Regeneration Company, Homes England, East Hampshire District Council and the Department for Education. I am pleased to say that I have had the opportunity to visit the exciting new building, relocating the school to new contemporary facilities with a capacity to accommodate a growing school community has been a pivotal part of the Whitehill and Borden Regeneration Plan. The new building will ensure that the children of Whitehill and Borden have the opportunity to achieve and succeed.
Councillor Chard. It is very unusual when the member of the council is sitting up here asking another member to speak on behalf of him. Now, I'm not going to, if he is going to speak, then he has spoken earlier on. Nevertheless, I'm going to allow for his supplementary. Councillor Crew, please. Councillor Chard, please.
Thank you. Just to inform you, negotiations are ongoing at the moment. We haven't got a date as of yet, but yes, we are still talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Health, please. Would you ask the question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I ask my question, may I also add my congratulations to Councillor Kirsty North and Phil North on the birth of their baby girl. My question to the Executive Member for Public Health is, can you tell me what the County Council is doing to reduce suicide rates in Hampshire?
Councillor Graczewski, please.
Thank you. I'm grateful to Councillor Hare for her timely question, and I'd like to begin by saying that one death from suicide is one too many, and I'm sure that's something we can all agree on. Hampshire County Council leads a partnership approach to reducing and preventing suicide through delivery of the Hampshire Suicide Prevention Strategy. This is delivered through a local action plan and multi-agency suicide prevention forum with broad membership, including the police, South West Trains, universities and partners across health, social care and the voluntary sector. The public health team undertakes an annual suicide audit, reviewing all deaths, and this provides a local context around suicides, enabling a local suicide prevention approach in the county. Data show that in Hampshire, 74% of suicide cases were male. The majority of both the male and female cases were aged between 40 and 54. 27% of people were in contact with mental health services at the time of their death, and 17% had seen their GP 2 weeks before their death. The suicide prevention strategy outlines 6 key areas of work informed by the audit and in line with national guidance on suicide prevention. And those 6 areas are, firstly, working to reduce the risk of suicide in high-risk groups. Secondly, tailoring approaches to improve mental health in specific groups. Reducing access to the means of suicide. Providing better information and support to those bereaved by suicide. Support the media in delivering sensitive approaches to suicide and suicidal behaviour, and supporting research, data collection and monitoring. There are several specific work streams that are being delivered, and these include training for frontline staff in suicide prevention and mental health. In partnership with Samaritans, we provide suicide prevention training to support frontline workers to identify the signs for risk of suicide and signpost to appropriate support. And to date, 537 frontline staff in both across the statutory and voluntary sector have received this training. And Connect 5 training to improve understanding, skills and confidence in having conversations on mental health, including how to signpost to resources and services as available. And to date, a total of 78 Connect 5 sessions have been delivered to 587 people working for a range of community organisations in Hampshire. In addition, 11 courses have been delivered to a total of 140 adult health and care staff in the County Council. And then there's the Men's Activity Network, and this is an EU-funded project to combine improvements in men's physical and mental health with skills development inspired by the Men's Shed movement. The project will deliver 45 groups across the county by the end of 2020, with bespoke training provided to groups to develop health champion, leader and group development support. Now, to date, a total of 8 groups have been set up, with a further 8 in development. And then there's the support for schools and colleges. A post-prevention protocol has been developed to help prevent suicides and provide guidance following a suspected suicide. And the protocol is available for all schools and colleges in the county. And then there's the broad partnership working that we do. Partnership working with South Western Railways has helped to identify and review where physical mitigations can be put in place across the rail network in Hampshire. Working with district council partners to identify and review again where physical mitigations can be put in place in public spaces. Work with our prisons has taken place to improve support for ex-prisoners. And Public Health has worked with partners across the police, the voluntary sector, to ensure the Help is at Hand guide is provided to anyone bereaved by suicide, often quite a wide group of people, not just immediate family. And this outlines the emotional and practical support available to them. Hampshire County Council signed, as we heard from the chairman at the start of this meeting, signed the Mental Health Prevention Concordat last month, pledging to work in partnership to collectively develop a prevention-focused approach to improving well-being and prevent mental ill health. And this will be delivered through a mental health partnership board, which is currently being set up. And I hope you all received my email about the health and well-being indices for your divisions by district ward. And finally, a word about the Sustainability and Transformation Partnership. Hampshire and Isle of Wight STP have received £468,000 to deliver against 4 key priority areas to support suicide prevention across the STP geography: primary care, self-harm workplaces, workplaces and financial anxiety and bereavement support. Thank you.
Councillor Krajewski. Thank you. As there is no more question, we will move on to part 1 items, which is the item 8, professionality and appointments. Leader of the council, please.
Councillors, you have the papers in front of you for these changes in the proportionality and appointments, and I'm just asking, under the recommendations, that the papers in front of you and the changes are approved.
Thank you, Leader. Agreed. There's approve the A and B both. Thank you. Item 9, medium-term financial strategy update and transportation 2021 saving proposal. Councillor Mann, please.
I suspect this particular item will be slightly longer than the last one.
You've got 15 minutes.
In recent years, it has become customary to present the MTFS for approval in the autumn alongside the strategic plan to deliver the savings required for the following two-year cycle. The report for consideration today continues Hampshire's careful approach to financial planning. The T21 programme is the fifth in a series of savings programmes delivered since 2010. Unfortunately, it will be the most challenging to date, as it will run alongside our previous programme, T19, which, while it is progressing well, with more than £100 million secured, a further £40 million of savings are still to be delivered. T21 also runs against a more challenging financial environment and increased service demands. The County Council remains under intense financial pressure and currently faces an £18 million funding gap by April 2021. Specifically, the County Council is experiencing growing demand for adult and children's social care, coupled with rising costs. If the County Council is to remain financially sustainable in the long term, the way in which growth in adults and children's social care is funded requires significant reform. The proposals in the report, which will form part of T20, the T21 programme, are being presented with a summary of results of the Serving Hampshire Balancing the Budget public consultation. The results of this consultation have been considered very carefully by the Cabinet, and they have been instrumental in informing the savings proposals. We are proposing a tried and tested strategy of investing savings early to deliver more efficient and cost-effective ways of working, maximising income generation opportunities and carefully using our reserves to address funding gaps to meet one-off demand pressures. It has served the County Council very well to date, underpinning the delivery of almost £500 million of savings in the last 9 years, and residents have told us they support this approach. In mentioning this, I would particularly refer councillors to the pie graph on page 36 of the report. This clearly shows how we've had to steadily shift our resources to meet the increasing demands of our statutory duties for adult and children's services. Whilst this year's settlement has helped to do this, it has in no way covered the full extra cost, which means it is necessary to find extra savings. What this graph also shows is the success of our savings model. In my view, it would be a mistake to change it now. As the graph shows, the pie graph shows, it is not a case of salami slicing. It's a case of asking each department to look afresh at the way they carry out their activities, and having done that, inject extra funding into those areas where demand and pressure is highest. I would also point councillors towards recommendation little x on page 24. This extra recommendation to the Cabinet was approved last month and indicates our willingness, as I mentioned earlier, to work closely with the districts and the boroughs to boost recycling and waste collection. With the changes coming to waste services at a national level, public expectations rightly are being raised about the environment and the financial pressures we all face. We need to act now to prepare for a different but more effective and affordable waste system in Hampshire in the future. And we need to do that with both the unitary authorities close by and also our districts and boroughs. I recognise that circumstances may differ across districts and the County Council will not require consensus but will work with those authorities willing to drive forward this initiative. Finally, councillors, the recommendations for the Council to approve follow on that little X recommendation on page 24. It is worth noting that in order to plan these extra savings, we will actually need to spend almost the whole of our budget bridging reserve, the old grant equalisation reserve, by April 2021. That, I think, shows how we are prepared to use reserves, provided they're focused on reducing future revenue expenditure and also to ensure that our reforms and savings are done over a reasonable period of time and not simply done very quickly with problems associated with that sort of task. And on that basis, I commend these savings proposals to the Council, and we, the Cabinet, are more than happy to answer questions and debate them.
Thank you, Councillor Keith Mann. Any question to the leader? No? Thank you. That means we agree with the recommendations? No. Or debate? No, that means agree with the recommendations or a debate?
Good try. Honest try,
Now open for the debate, please. Anybody who wishes to speak? Councillor Keith House, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That was indeed a very good try. At the beginning of the meeting, I'm told that you were all told that I was going to be late due to an emergency dental appointment. The bad news for everyone is I can speak. So I'm sorry to disappoint you on that one straight up. Of course, the leader has moved his position slightly from his predecessors, and he sometimes agrees with the opposition. Indeed, earlier this morning, he said he wasn't going to join the Liberal Democrats just yet. So there is some hope. There is some hope of progress, and we'll perhaps return to that in just a moment. But I did disagree with him when he said in his leader's announcement that this wasn't the place, I paraphrase, for political debate. For political debate. Well, if this isn't the place for political debate in Hampshire, where is? Where is? This is the pulpit of democracy in our county, and it is right and proper that this county's proposals, this Conservative county's proposals, are properly scrutinised, and that's what we will do. And I was very pleased at Cabinet. I'm disappointed that Stephen Reid isn't here, because Stephen Reid, as soon as I finished speaking at Cabinet, agreed with me that the diagnosis that I'd given 2 years ago, that the underlying budget position of this county was not sustainable in the long term, was right. And that remains the case today. Now, some years ago, it was either an astute politician, Councillor Perry, Councillor Thornber, or one of the senior staff that concluded that it would be a really good wheeze to move the key budget decisions away from the budget meeting in February and put them in the autumn when there wasn't an election in progress. Some things change, don't they? So here we are, in the middle of an election, debating £80 million of more cuts from Conservative councillors to Hampshire's services to total £560 million of cuts over the last decade to vital services for our public and for our community. We can dwell on those figures, and we should. And the problem that underlies all of this is that this is not the end to these cuts. This budget remains unsustainable, with a financial position that cannot be maintained in the long term, just as we have repeatedly said, and just as you have failed to deal with as an administration over that time. So the incremental reduction of our services continues, and it's Hampshire people that pay. Now, back in 2008, I think we probably all recognise that in the depths of a world financial crisis, there had to be some temporary reductions in spending. Some temporary reductions in spending. And we went through that period up to 2015, and indeed, by then, with a coalition government with Liberal Democrats sharing power, our economy across the country was growing. It was growing strongly. At that time, it was growing stronger than anywhere else in Europe. How times have changed. Since then, we've had the referendum in 2016 and the Conservative obsession with Brexit and the need for more cuts to vital public services. 3 years more of economic slowdown, 3 years more of declining investment, 3 years more of slower growth, 3 years more of loss of confidence, and 3 years of more austerity with more to come. And Boris Johnson's Brexit is expected to cost the UK economy as much as £70 billion over the next decade, compared with remaining in the European Union. Now, I know some of you, like this side of the chamber, support staying in the European Union. You have the option to speak up and say that over the course of the next few weeks. Now, that £70 billion will take 4% from our economy by the end of the 2020s, and that's the equivalent of about £1,100 for every person each year, compared with the situation where Britain stays in the European Union. And Brexit alone is costing this county council, and that's why it's relevant to this debate, Chairman, this county council £8 million a year. And we've learned over the last few weeks that Boris's deal has a worse economic impact than Theresa May's deal. And that's why you're having to keep cutting year after year after year. Now let's think what we've lost over those 10 years of Conservative cuts. We used to have public transport that we valued, that could genuinely help tackle climate change by reducing congestion, reducing pollution, and being fairer to our climate. We had youth services that we were proud of, with youth leaders across the county tackling social issues, tackling community safety issues for our young people, and improving the quality of health. We used to have an investment plan for the public realm. Can you remember when we used to improve our high streets, when we used to think about our towns and our villages, the centres of our communities, and invest in them to improve them for the future, to make them more sustainable? We used to have children's centres protecting young families. Again, saving money in the long term, spending now to save for the future. And we didn't have penal adult care charges. We didn't have charging policies that increasingly priced people out of things that really mattered to them and that were essential. Not optional add-ons, as we often get from our district council charging issues, but serious matters that matter to all people in our community. And in waste, we were a leader 20 years ago. We weren't doing too bad 10 years ago. Now we're a laggard. We're at the back of the pack, and we're nowhere near making any improvements at all. And we see cost shunting that doesn't just affect this county council's budget, but affects other public services too. We are shunting costs to other parts of the public sector, and we shouldn't try to deny that. Cuts to our budget supporting younger disabled people, cuts to funding for domestic abuse victims, cuts to waste services to discourage districts from recycling, and yet we claim we are future-proofing against climate change. We're not. We're not demonstrating the climate emergency here with these proposals. And cuts to public health, perhaps worst of all, alcohol and substance abuse services, funding to tackle smoking and weight loss, sexual health services. These are some of the losses we're seeing with Conservative proposals for our budgets. 2 years ago, I asked Cabinet to look at 5 things: to give more protection to frontline services, to protect vulnerable residents rather than see those communities subject to the harshest cuts suffer, to develop a more coherent long-term investment strategy to generate income, to genuinely work in partnership with the rest of the public sector rather than cost shunt to the NHS, police, local councils, and even within our council, and to work with other councils and effectively lobby government, to successfully lobby government and Hampshire's MPs to protect them from destroying local services. And you did none of those things, and you're not proposing to do any of them today either. And this strategy says that we'll be here in 2 years' time doing the same thing again. In 4 years' time, we'll be here doing the same thing again. In 6 years' time, we'll be here doing the same thing again. Will we never, ever learn? And every time, we're cutting services that are more and more essential, not those that are just desirable or want-to-haves. Things that really matter to our communities, that affect the quality of their lives, the quality of their environment, and their future life prospects. Yes, we are reducing lifetime lengths here, and we should admit that, because that is the effect of these cuts. There is still time to change course, and it's been encouraging over the last year or so to see the number of people who have changed course in our national political scene. There's been some discouragements along the way too. When we think about some of the more moderate Conservative members of Parliament, like Ed Vaizey and Amber Rudd and Nicky Morgan and Joe Johnson and Oliver Letwin and Ken Clark and Philip Hammond, all standing down at this election because they can't bear to be part of it any longer. When we see Rory Stewart and Anna Soubry leaving the Conservative Party to go in different directions. When we see Justine Greening say it's going to be hard to ask people to vote Conservative when Sam Jemiah, Sarah Wollaston, Heidi Allen all join the Liberal Democrats. When Matthew Parris, of all people, after 50 years, decides he's going to join the Liberal Democrats and vote for the Liberal Democrats. The Conservative Party is being hollowed out. You may laugh out of desperation, I suspect, but the reality is that the majority of common sense people who have got progressive ideals for the future are leaving and have left the Conservative Party. Now, what really matters with all this? Does this strategy tackle the climate emergency? No, it doesn't. Does this strategy give every child the best start in life? No, it doesn't. Does this strategy build a fairer economy? No, it doesn't. Does this strategy transform our mental health services? No, it doesn't. We need to build a better, brighter future for our country. And if the leader would read Joe Swinson's document that found his way into his email box yesterday, he'd find those themes that really do matter to our communities about tackling the climate emergency, giving children the best start in life, building a fairer economy, transforming our mental health services, and stopping Brexit to make sure we can pay for all of this, for our future and our country. The Conservative strategy here, Mr. Chairman, doesn't do any of that. Now, we recognise that we haven't got the numbers in this chamber to force this strategy to change here today. But, Chairman, mark my words, we will be out on the streets helping Britain to change this strategy on the 12th of December.
Thank you, Councillor Keith House. Councillor Westbrook, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Today we're being asked to support the proposals for the transformation to 2021. Chairman, it was 2 years ago in this chamber when debating the previous transformation, T19, that we heard said this is a very dark day for Hampshire and a very dark day for this county council in reference to those proposals. 2 years on, things have worsened and continue to remain very dark, Chairman. We are working in the dark over funding. We're in the dark over Brexit. We're in the dark over the long-awaited for adult social care green paper. And we're literally in the dark without street lights. And we've had to suffer a Prime Minister who's in the dark on almost everything else. Fortunately for us, Chairman, in this council, we have some very bright lights when it comes to our officers, who are tasked with the increasingly difficult everyday job of finding these savings as a result of a sustained period of cuts as austerity goes on and on and on. Savings of £480 million have already been driven out over the past 9 years, and with a further target of 13% reduction needed in departmental budgets, the report tells us that will require a complete relook, with previously discounted options now having to be reconsidered. Having to revisit previous rejected options shows you exactly where we're at. We've all been briefed on the proposals by our finance officers, and the latest report, I understand, has also been shown and briefed to Hampshire MPs. Surely, Chairman, they cannot fail to grasp the urgency the local government is now facing. These two reports clearly explain the problems we face as a council. Chairman, back in July 2018, we listened to the enthusiasm of Councillor Reid when he discovered the new block diagram that appeared in the MTFS, and that he thought it was an excellent diagram. That diagram showed simply and starkly the total required spending and the total required funding over that 2-year period. Chairman, if Councillor Reid thought that was a great diagram, then he's going to love the one in this MTFS report. This one's in the shape of a wheel. I call it the wheel of misfortune. It shows quite clearly that local government has borne the brunt of a decade of austerity and that it has lost 77% of its funding over that 10-year period, a reduction that will shortly stand at over £500 million per annum. That's truly staggering. Chairman, when we look at the consultation results on these transformation proposals, the responses, although increased by 1,600 from T19, still only accounts for less than 0.5% of our 1.3 million residents. Yet one of the key findings from the consultation found that the majority of respondents, 52%, agreed that the County Council should continue with its current financial strategy. That means 48% didn't or were unsure. 52%, 48%, that sort of rings a bell, really. The whole country has spent the last 3 years arguing about how relevant those stats are at giving an informed opinion. We still have some very controversial Stage 2 consultations to come too. Cuts to short breaks that were fervently fought by families last year are back on the agenda in January, along with the libraries. Not forgetting a continued lobbying by government, by the administration on home-to-school transport and concessionary bus passes, and an extended desire by the leadership of this council to charge a tip tax. We did have some good news this year. Children's Services receiving an Ofsted rating of outstanding in all areas was a definite highlight against the backdrop of austerity. But the pressures remain high, with the Local Government Association warning of the pressures on Children's Services nationally becoming unsustainable, with a £2 billion funding gap expected by 2020 if something isn't done. There's a positive news about the Transforming Children's Social Care programme and about the direction of travel. Yet the report talks about significant growth in the average cost of placements across the market, particularly in the independent fostering agency. The recent BBC report highlighted the fact private equity firms are buying up smaller independent fostering agencies. 3 hedge funds now account for 45% of all spend with local authorities in this sector. This helps to explain part of the cost pressure we are seeing, which is clearly driving prices even higher. This is awful. We're seeing hedge funds who are focused on speculative, short-term profit with taxpayers' money benefiting from the cost of the placements for children in care. In adult social care, we are in some respects a victim of our own success, where we've achieved a reduction in the numbers of delayed transfers of care, something we all want to see, which helps support the NHS. The council's also had success in keeping people out of care for longer. These items consequently have created an increased budget. when talking about the economy, transport and the environment. I think it only right, Chairman, to quote the man in charge, the executive member for these matters, Councillor Humby, who said in the New Milton Advertiser and Leamington Times, "The chronic underfunding of local road maintenance by successive national governments has left local councils with little choice other than presiding over a managed decline of the road network." I have to agree with Councillor Humby on that. Successive Conservative and coalition governments under Cameron, May and Johnson really have brought us to this point. In 2017, I raised concerns about what I thought was a false economy of only temporary repairs to our carriageways and footpaths. And in February's budget speech, I said how much it was estimated to cost to bring everything up to an acceptable standard. At the time, we needed a staggering £285 million for carriageways, £45 million for footpaths, and although I welcome the additional £2 million to invest in the maintenance in 2019-20, it does make you wonder if the government had invested more into our roads, where we'd be. The number of calls received by the service has doubled over the last 10 years to over 100,000 each year. That in itself is a reflection of where we are. And just handling and responding to that level of calls is time-consuming and costly for the call centre. Officers and engineers and now requires an additional recurring funding of up to £300,000 to provide additional resources. Following the declaration of a climate emergency earlier this year, and which we all supported, it's clear there isn't a problem with the direction and urgency with which we all want to take the agenda. But Chairman, if we take one of the questions from earlier today as an example that asks for an update from the Council on progress with the Council's emerging climate change action plan and how that aligns with the UK's government target for carbon neutrality. Chairman, I have serious concerns about the government's targets and what that could mean for our futures. We as a council are working hard to support the green agenda, yet the government can't even deliver a green paper. When announcing the spending review back in September, Sajid Javid talked about getting the deficit down, when in truth the Tories are getting people down. He also talks about a decade of recovery when it's a decade that will only be remembered for austerity. The government's sticking plaster approach for local government only provides temporary and inadequate solutions to serious issues. Reading the report, Chairman, it seems to me that cutting back on non-statutory services may be the only option for local government, but it does not represent good value for money. Of real concern now is the lack of spending on preventative measures, the cutting of youth services in order to balance the budget. Short-term cuts may not provide savings in the long term or could result in just displacing costs to another part of the public sector. Of the 266 pages which provide 73 equality impact assessments in this report, 55% of them show at least one negative impact. The most likely impacted are children, older people, more female than male, those on low incomes and a wide range of groups with disabilities. It must be reiterated that beyond 2021-22, without a significant change in the way in which growth in adults and children's social care is funded, the County Council is unlikely to be financially sustainable, since it is not possible to sustain that growth in demand and cost indefinitely. The impact assessment for the Working Differently programme for adult health and children's services care states that, if agreed, will have a significant impact on staff due to reduced staff numbers over time, potential changes to the skill and capabilities mix, and increases in workload. Are we really saying, Chairman, that our staff have the capacity for increased workloads? Or is there a danger of a tipping point for remaining employees where it begins to impact on their health and well-being? Local government has had to cope with a prolonged period of real-term spending reduction which is without parallel in modern times. This large fall in resources has been primarily caused by very significant cuts in central government grants. Local government cuts to public health may make savings now, but if fewer people give up smoking in 10 years' time, we may see more people presenting at A&E with respiratory disease. A panel of experts on public health reiterated this, saying in terms of the cost to the NHS, there is significant impact from not meeting what we could achieve by reducing smoking rates. Everyone agrees that prevention is better than cure and that prevention is cheaper than cure. In general, the preventative end of the public health grant is where the cuts have come. In February, when I raised concerns over public health in this chamber, I was scolded for scaremongering. I was right to be scared. Members would be only too aware of the drug and alcohol-related problems we have in some, if not all, of our divisions in Hampshire, and I urge all members to read page 185 of the report, which is the high negative impact assessment for the cuts to the Substance Misuse Service. The assessment says that the reduction in investment will potentially result in an increase in harm to children and families who have an alcohol or drug-dependent parent. And goes on to explain, Chairman, that accessing substance misuse treatment services is a protective factor in preventing drug-related deaths, and reducing access to these services could result in an increased number of deaths. A £900,000 reduction in this service has already been agreed for 2020 to 2021, and these proposals for a further reduction of 1.2 million are a step too far. Enough is enough. Following on and linked to this issue is that of the Domestic Abuse Victim and Perpetrator Service, where a 13% reduction is proposed. 40,000 children and young people were estimated to be affected by domestic abuse in Hampshire in 2017-18. Deprived communities and the most vulnerable will be the hardest hit by these proposals. Moving away from universal support to targeted, will lose the preventative capability and be more costly in the long run. The Conservative government may think that approach is acceptable for carriageways, but you cannot resurface a life. Chairman, many in this chamber talk openly about their anger over their government not funding this authority, like there is some sort of disconnect between them and the government they represent. I really do hope the residents of Hampshire take note when members knock on their doors during this election, if we have any chance of turning this ship around. What will be in their manifesto to prevent the continued sliding down of our public services? Let's be clear, over the next few weeks, 55 of you will be out campaigning for more of the same. Not something I would want to do, Chairman. As you probably gathered, Chairman, we will not be supporting the proposals, and I urge the leader to act as soon as possible after December the 12th and go back to whichever government we end up with and ask for a stop to this austerity and seek the necessary funding required to improve the quality of life for all the residents we represent and beyond.
Right, members. Mr. Benison, Councillor Benison of Last Major, you're okay? Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson, please. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Jackie Porter, please.
Thank you. And I have to say, Councillor Westbrook, certainly my speech will be not dissimilar, I think. I appreciate that you've got to balance the budget you've got, and I think Councillor House has made it very clear that this is not in our gift to be able to change what you're going to be doing. But I just would like to raise a few points. The first one is about balancing the budget. I'm asking you really, is it right to spend your valuable money consulting, and I put that in inverted commas, trying to justify proposals which are shown to have strong negative impacts on the most vulnerable in our country? Why are we even bothering to consult? Why don't we just reject that proposal right from the start? For example, public health. In public health nursing for 0 to 5-year-olds, we know that about 14,500 children are born every year. That's 70,000 children who are at risk if we do what you're going to be proposing. The second one is early help. Who actually will be the participants in that consultation? The ones who've had the service, the ones who are receiving the service, or the ones who don't even know they need the service yet? How do we know whether that consultation would be worthwhile? Oral health for children, again, a statutory function. The list goes on. At least you're being honest that when you talk about recycling and taking wood to the local HWRCs, that you're not even going to be consulting on those. You're just going to be doing the job. A one-off amount for children looked after is actually really welcome. And yet again in 1920, adding some money to that is greatly welcomed, 4.6 million. But as opposition, we did actually ask for these increases in the budgets last time round at the budget conversations in our own select committees. And we were told one-off sums would be allowed and would be given. But you're giving a one-off sum in 1920, a one-off sum in 2021, and actually talking about putting a one-off sum of 1.9 million into 21-22. It's just a sop to the budget that we really need for each child looked after. Our staff do an amazing job and have an outstanding service. These children need our love and protection to bring a stronger society in future. Why call it a one-off sum? This needs budgeting for. I do notice as well the reduction in budget for ETE, and I sympathise with having to manage so many miles of roads for our cars. But actually, we're hoping here for a greener future. Cyclists are really struggling to cycle on roads where the criteria to mend those holes keeps car drivers safe, but actually definitely not good enough for cyclists. It's difficult enough for districts at the moment to deliver when you're taking money away for recycling credits, but without delivering the county's availability to support active travel, we really are making it really very hard for us to all become more carbon neutral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Hoppenheimer, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be supporting the strategy in the MTFS, and I'd like to explain why. The reality is that despite having the second lowest precept in the country, Hampshire County Council services are rated good or outstanding across the board. We're the only county council to have children's services that are rated outstanding in all areas by Ofsted. Where league tables are produced, such as for exam results and highways, we're consistently in the top 3 in the country. We have strong reserves, which enable us to invest in schools and infrastructure to develop the economy. We're the largest public sector provider of shared services in the country. We must be doing something right, Chairman. And we are doing something right. What we're doing is planning ahead. We are continuously improving and becoming more efficient through our innovations, and we're also maintaining a cast-iron determination to look after the most vulnerable people in society, which we do. We can be proud of our record, we can be proud of this approach, and that's why I'm proud to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hoppenheimer. Councillor Mark Cooper, please. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Latham, please.
This report is probably the most important report that we have ever had to consider. Can you hear me now? I consider this report to be probably the most important report that we have had to consider for a very long time. I've listened to the observations from the other side of the chamber, and from my point of view, I consider there are optimistic things contained in this report that we need to highlight. There has been criticism of the Conservative administration. Councillor House at Cabinet was asking what our plan was. Well, in essence, this is it. It's our financial strategy for the next 3 years. I look at what SIPFA says with regard to stresses, symptoms of stress for local authority, running down your reserves, failing to live within your means, etc. Not one of those symptoms applies to Hampshire County Council. We went for consultation in the summer and asked the residents, those who replied, what they wanted or what they considered Hampshire should do with regard to savings of 80 million. Their response was that we should continue with our financial strategy, that we should use our reserves widely. First and foremost, though, we should look after the elderly and those most in need, and we should increase our efficiencies and target increased income. Actually, aren't we doing all of that? The important thing, I think, for any business, company, council is cash flow. And we have it, fortunately. 2019 was 140 million savings. We have achieved 100, and the 40 will be covered in GER. Looking forward to 2021, nobody underestimates for 1 minute the challenges for adult social care and children's services. However, we do have within GER sufficient funds to cash flow any shortfalls in those services if we do not achieve the savings during that period. So we are actually covered on that as well. So all in all, what we have for the coming 3 years is a policy which has stood us in good stead for the last 10 years. The people of Hampshire are entitled to a good service from us, outstanding Ofsted would say in terms of children's services. And I believe that if we follow the recommendations, all of them contained within this report, then we can continue to give to the people of Hampshire the service which I think they deserve.
Thank you, Councillor Latham. Councillor Wade, please. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Todd, please.
Cuts have been devolved in order to hide from the public what the real outcomes are going to be. No Conservative MP or councillor has ever been elected on a mandate to close libraries, eliminate youth services, or to end expected highways maintenance. No Conservative MP or councillor has ever stood on an election platform where they've told people that's what's going to happen. However, these are the outcomes of their policies, and they need to be held to account for it. The Conservative Party, as we all knew it, isn't really standing in this general election. To quote Kenneth Clarke, it is a crazy nationalist right-wing organisation that is using the Conservative Party name. We can see this from the long list of Conservative MPs Councillor House reeled off who wouldn't entertain standing as a Conservative at this election. However, many residents may continue to vote for the Conservative brand through habit or the hope that they can still trust the party they have voted for a long time. As has been said, we may not have the numbers on the Lib Dem benches to change this county's unsustainable strategy, but during the coming weeks we need to use this as an example of why we must have change nationally. The Conservative Party, it doesn't seem to me, doesn't seem to have a future, it seems to me, and we need to use this strategy here and the other examples of disasters around the country to emphasise to people that the country doesn't have a decent future if the Conservatives stay in government either.
Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak this morning, but I was prompted to do so by the phrase managed decline. And this is a form of words that Councillor Humby used in the local press to try and explain why it is that we are getting such a poor standard of highway maintenance these days. Most people don't spend their lives worrying about the day-to-day business of Hampshire County Council, but they do notice when there's a pothole in the road. And they do notice particularly when that pothole has a white line painted around it and it stays in that condition for a very long time. And I'm just an ordinary councillor. I don't pretend that I have very much influence at all, but I do spend an inordinate amount of time trying to explain to people why it is the potholes on our roads aren't being fixed. And it is a challenge. After all, we've got some 5,000 miles of road to look after. And Chairman, I think it's a little bit unhelpful when Hampshire County Council spends its resources on positive press releases about dragon patchers, because that kind of sets up an expectation that all our potholes will be filled in quickly. And we know that that's not the case when we've got 5,000 miles of road to look after. And Chairman, I return to this theme of managed decline because I think that's a sort of symptom of almost every service area that Hampshire County Council looks after. And I pay my own tribute to the officers. I think they've done a wonderful job in all the areas that they work, given the political direction that they're given. But Chairman, I worry most of all, in common with a lot of my colleagues, about the effects that the cuts are having on our elderly and most vulnerable people. And I endorse what the Leader of the Council said right at the start of this meeting about the importance of lobbying central government for more investment. We really do need a more joined up National Health Service with social services, an integrated system, which means that we're not only stopping people from getting ill in the first place, but making sure that they're properly cared for when inevitably they are. So, Chairman, I'm going to finish my piece for those that are feeling uncomfortable today about some of the cuts and the impacts of the cuts that they've been party to, I've produced a little calendar. It's a charity calendar featuring my photographs, mostly of the New Forest area, and I would encourage members to purchase it for £5 because at least some of the money will be going to a local food bank that I know that you would wish to support. So at any time, approach me and you can have one of my charity calendars for £5 and maybe start feeling a little better about yourselves in future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like Councillor Harrison, I wasn't going to speak, and I think maybe I ought also to declare an interest. I'm a trustee of the Hampshire Cultural Trust, and in that very long list of all the members, obviously, of this council working very hard, that is one of the committees that I remain on, so maybe that interest should be declared. I listened carefully to the party political speeches from the leader of the Labour group and the leader of the Lib Dem group, and I just ask members to reflect, can anybody tell me when we have had a Labour government in this country that has not ended up with an economic disaster? Attlee had to devalue the pound. Dennis Healey had to go cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund. And as I recall, the last financial secretary to the Treasury said there's no money left after the last Labour government. So we really want no lessons from them. I listened very carefully to what Councillor House had to say. The Liberal Democrat Party, but it just seemed to ignore one important fact, that this nation had a referendum where people, whether we agreed with them or not, voted to leave the European Union. And it seems to me that the Liberal Democrat Party just want to ignore that and put it to one side. Now, frankly, you can't do that. If there are principles that make me a Conservative, I will certainly put patriotism. I think that is one of the important features of being a Conservative. But also there are realism and pragmatism. And that is what we have to do in this council chamber. We have to be realistic, we have to be pragmatic, we have to face up to, A, how the people voted, but also the economic realities that we must face as a county. And Hampshire certainly has a very good record. I listened to that repeated record that the reserves are obscene. They're not obscene, they are essential, and they're the indication of a prudent, carefully managed council so that we can mitigate some of the more difficult decisions that we would could have to take. Sure, we have had to make difficult decisions in the past, but all isn't that bad. And it's certainly, I wasn't going to mention local issues, but Councillor Cooper was talking about the situation in Romsey. The town centre has been refurbished. An extra care home is being built. There is a new youth centre there, funded by Hampshire County Council, where we put in the capital cost. So all around the county, we can find examples of good work that we're doing, and we're prioritising adult care and children's care, and that is what we certainly should do. So it is important, but I would equally agree with the leader of the council, and this has been put in reports before this council before, the present financial funding situation for local government is not sustainable. And I listen to party leaders, and I include my own party in that, who will prioritise the National Health Service, will talk about the importance of defence, who will talk about the importance of schools, and of course they're important, but local government also needs to be on that list. I have regularly used my efforts to say, don't forget local government, and I also put down a word of warning that those who think that business rates is a panacea that will solve local government financial problems, that isn't the case either. So we must, all of us, collectively to all of our party leaders, tell them not to forget the importance of local government. But finally, finishing on a political point, it may well be that the Liberal Democrat leaders say they don't want to put Mr. Corbyn into power. But I fear that what they might do is let him get into power. And that is what I will be going on the streets of Hampshire trying to prevent.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Chedwin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I listened with interest to Councillor Perry. I've got a lot of time for respect, actually. And indeed your daughter who stood out against her own government recently. And you're right in saying we have to be realistic and pragmatic. But we also have to be true to our own principles and to stand up for the things that all of us were elected to try and protect local services. And to defend the Conservative Party, and I did think for quite a while I was going to be the only one who would, because you're not very good at defending yourselves these days. I do think most of you, like most of us, were elected onto this council to try and improve the quality of life for the people who elected you, to try and protect and improve local services, not to preside over their decline. I don't think very many of you, I would hope perhaps not any of you, were elected to try and preside over the decline of services that we all value, that our constituents value, and that are vital to this county and country's future prosperity. And that's what saddens me. I've listened to far more budget debates than I wish to over the last 34 years I've been on this council. But it gets more and more depressing every single year when we talk about more cuts on top of the last set of cuts, with more cuts to come even after these present ones are implemented. And we are only presiding these days over decline of services, and that is not what we should be doing. Our constituents deserve better than that. We ourselves certainly want better than that. I could, as others have done, go on about many services. I just want to single out one, which has hardly been mentioned, and that's libraries. Now, in the time I've been as culture spokesman of our group, this council actually has had a pretty good record on libraries. And I take credit to Councillor Cooper and others who've been here before. Councillor Cooper gave an assurance when he was the culture member that we would not close any libraries, and he kept to it. But we have, over the last 3 or 4 years, been cutting services there, just like we have every other service in this county. The mobile library service no longer exists, cut completely. The home library service almost cut completely as well. Library book fund, millions cut from library book fund. Professional librarians, there is hardly a single professional librarian in any of our libraries now, only library assistants that simply don't have the same qualifications and depth of knowledge. Computer terminals, one of the huge success stories of libraries that you go in, they are all, wherever you go around the county, they are all always in use. And yet we're cutting them by a third in the current financial year. The books, as I say, have gone already, the services, libraries being told if you have other activities in there, they've got to pay their way. Often they can't. And having cut everything in the libraries, we're now proposing to actually cut many of the libraries themselves. There are 48 county-run libraries in Hampshire. 37 of them are potentially at threat of closure at the moment. Because in a library review, and incidentally, there's a library review board that has never been able to debate this most major and fundamental of items, 37 are at risk of closure. Now, when we raised this at the last full culture meeting, Councillor Woodward, to his credit, said that there will be a consultation in November, and he assured us it would not be a woolly consultation. Sooner or later, you have to name the libraries you are actually going to close. And you were going to do it in November. Of course, there's now a general election, some may have noticed. So apparently, the consultation's being put off until after November, to some date after polling. Now, Councillor Woodward was, as I say, quite right. There will not be a woolly consultation. Indeed, in November, there will be no consultation at all. And I just ask you, if you value your libraries, which are actually used by far more of our constituents than almost any other service we provide, and they're also, as an aside, the kind of people who vote, and often vote Conservative, if you value them, why are you going to close them? And why won't you tell people until after the general election which ones you're going to close?
support those community groups and the vital services that this council provides. But, although I am absolutely delighted that Councillor Manns is going to continue to take the fight to central government, to make those people in the Westminster bubble listen to the people here in Hampshire, I am slightly concerned also to hear some of the comments from members opposite. I agree with Councillor Cooper about the double yellow lines. I have the same problem, but of course this is now, in my area, it's been devolved down to District Council, and it's hopeless. And I'm just hearing it is, so there's another councillor saying the same thing. Yet, what I'm concerned about is it's very easy to say that you would spend money on all the things that we would like to do, despite these massive and sustained cuts to local government. But these cuts started under the coalition. In addition to which, you know, members opposite, that this council is under a legal obligation to provide a balanced budget. Are you seriously advocating the council ends up in special measures like Northampton? Perhaps you would like a referendum for increasing the council tax. But let's face it, even if you campaign for one, you'd probably ignore the results like we have on Europe. I think you're also being a bit selective in your history. I'm sorry to feel here that you're losing your way on many levels, and it is difficult to criticise. But you have failed, again, to provide any serious alternative balanced budgetary figures. Again, you're meant to be the opposition, you failed. And you're selective in your history. You mentioned children's centres. Well, the decision to close these was indeed wrong. I campaigned to save mine. But it was due to cuts from central government, and who was in power then? The coalition! 2013, it was the coalition. So, I would say that this council is absolutely right. It is right to prioritise social care and children's services. It is absolutely right to look after the people who are worse off in our society. This is what this council is doing, despite all the cuts from central government. And yes, I agree they're Conservatives and they need to wake up. But I would add, we are also now in a serious situation about a matter of survival in terms of our climate change. I'm glad we're doing something about the climate change agenda, and that must also be our very top priority. Members, I don't like cuts. I didn't get into local government to make cuts. I'm sure none of us did. But at the end of the day, we are under a legal obligation to provide a balanced budget, and we must prioritise the most important things for the people of Hampshire.
Thank you, Councillor Crewe. Councillor Gary Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to applaud the leader in public to openly admit that we collectively should go to all those prospective parliamentary candidates and say, if you are elected as a Member of Parliament for a Hampshire constituency, what are you going to do to support Hampshire? That's been a criticism not just of Conservative MPs, but all of the MPs that represent the constituencies in Hampshire, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. That's the first point. The second point, we talk about insufficient funding from central government. Austerity. We must cut our cloth to suit our means. But it's not fair. We argue about fairer funding for local government. Highly successful council such as Hampshire doesn't get anywhere near the funding a similar council might get in the north. I sit on the Police and Crime Panel Finance Working Group. I was told yesterday in a meeting that Hampshire Police, if they had the same funding as Durham Constabulary, would have 1,500 more officers in Hampshire. So it's not just fair in Hampshire for Hampshire County Council, it's across the piece. So we all want more money from central government. That's one of the criticisms. But I'll take you back to September when I stood here and said, fine, sign up for the climate emergency. The government have already committed to spend £1 trillion. £1 trillion between now and 2050 to achieve carbon zero. That's where they're going to spend their money, and they're going to say, we can spend it because you all signed up to it. That's where that focus will be. Councillor Crewe said that's the most important thing in the room. Well, so be it. That's where your money's going to go. It's not going to go on local services here. And that's a real problem because we do have issues. I will support this measure. I am a dual hatter. The waste and recycling issue really affects my borough in Havant. Absolutely no doubt. I was at a Project Integra strategic board meeting a few weeks ago where we identified significant concerns about the way that strategic body works. I was at the energy recycling facility on Monday. I was at the MRF on Monday. One of the deputies today turned around and said, we must recycle plastic. Actually, the greatest contamination in our green waste is plastic. It's the plastic we cannot recycle. If we took that contaminant out, the cost savings to this authority run into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds per year. Let's be sensible about the way we spend our money and how we use it. If I do have one concern about children's services, who perform brilliantly, I know of examples where secure mental health facilities are not available in the county. To have a child sectioned and placed in one of those facilities and then have to have them cared for hundreds of miles up north seems desperately unfair. If we could do anything to ensure that we have the facilities necessary to support our young people with mental health issues in secure facilities in the county would be a fantastic step forward, and that'd be really beneficial. And the final part, the Leader of the Opposition said, it's the obsession of Brexit that is stopping us from doing anything and moving forward. I disagree. It's the Remainers' obsession for stopping Brexit that has stymied us for the last 3 years. The oxymoron party, as I like to call them, because they're not liberal and they're certainly not democratic, are welcome to all those people that decide they can only understand under Conservative banner. You are welcome to them, because all of those individuals stood on a manifesto in 2017 that said we would enact the result of the 2016 referendum, and they failed to do so. They didn't keep their promises with the electorate. I'm glad to see the back of them. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hughes. Councillor Collett, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was planning to speak, but it was Councillor Perry that inspired me to put my hand up, because he referred to Brexit. And what was the result of the Brexit referendum 3.5 years ago? I'll tell you what the result was. 52-48, a country split down the middle. And it's the arrogance of those who represent the 52% totally dismissing and ignoring the 48% who are also entitled to be respected and to have their position understood. Thank you, Chairman. That's very kind of you. The arrogance of the 52%, ignoring the 48%, the right response from government, instead of dismissing the 48%, would have been to say, we are divided down the middle, we will respect the 52% and pursue what we need to do to leave, and then when we know what that entails, we will put that to a final vote. That would have been the right way forward. It would just to show some respect to the fact the country is split down the middle. Councillor Carew mentioned Lib Dems in coalition. Yes, I'm very proud of the fact that we played our role in stabilising the economy of the country at a time of great crisis. That was 9 years ago. The continuation of what has happened since then isn't about that anymore. It's about destroying services. It's about cutting all the way through. And that's what we will have nothing to do with. And that's why we will oppose the cuts that the Conservatives are still pushing through. Chairman, we have excellent officers, top officers, who give excellent advice and do whatever they can to make the best of the decisions that are imposed upon them. What we do, they will do their best to make sure we do well. It's what we can't do. It's what's being lost. It's what's no longer able to be done that is the issue. I would say, Chairman, it's a darn good job austerity is ending, isn't it? I dread to think what position we'd be in today if austerity hadn't ended 18 months ago when Theresa May announced it. £43 million to be taken out of adult care services. That's what you're voting for today. £43 million to be taken out of adult care services. And look at the detail of that. One phrase that jumps out time and time again is demand prevention. Demand prevention. That can mean two things. That can mean measures that mean people don't need the services. That's a benign form of demand prevention. It can also mean changing the threshold so that people no longer qualify for those services. That phrase can hide a multitude of sins, and the reality is that the true horrors of what you're voting through today will only become clear later on, and Councillor Chegwin has given an example of that on libraries. Chairman, one of the things that underlines this today is that this is £80 million to be found over 2 years. And many people may be thinking, good, right, once that's done, with a bit of luck, it'll all be over. But the advice from our treasurers is that 40 million a year will be the continuing savings that have to be added to these savings year on year unless something changes. I'm pleased that the leader has written to MPs, has written to the government, and met those MPs who could be bothered to turn up, but he's not being listened to. Nothing is changing. And frankly, what we need is a Hampshire Extinction Rebellion protest. We should all be in Downing Street, sitting outside number 10 and saying we won't go until they start treating these issues seriously. Unless you start doing something serious like that, you are tilting at windmills. And sadly, the moderates amongst your ranks are leaving you. You are, as already been described, becoming a very right-wing party. And those of you who choose to say, be it on your heads.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I felt I should probably respond on some of the points that Councillor Chegwin was trying to make on libraries. I don't think it's appropriate to start saying 37 libraries are under threat. We have 52 libraries, actually, Councillor Chegwin, not 48. 4 of them, of course, are community-run libraries. But the facts of the matter are pretty clear in terms of libraries, and that is that over the last 10 years, we've seen the overall number of visits each year to libraries reduced from 7 million down to 4.5 million. That's over a third reduction in the numbers of people actually visiting libraries in this county. And a county that, it must be said, is extremely well served in terms of the numbers of libraries that we do have, which have grown significantly over the years. So hopefully that puts it in some context. So visits to libraries hugely reduced, but in terms of the digital downloads, that's grown. In fact, 10 years ago, we had less than 4,000 a year. That's now up to 360,000. So I think there's a very clear change there in the way things are working. We do have to make a saving on the library's budget of £1.75 million. That is significant, and as the libraries, of course, are very staff intensive, then I think it's clear for all where we're going to have to look at finding those savings. I wanted to see a consultation this month, and I'd be happy for that consultation to be happening this month. But of course, the realities of political life are that when our political masters in Westminster decide, finally, that there's going to be a general election in this country, then what we cannot do is carry out a consultation like that during a general election. So the next option was to carry out that consultation straight after the election. And of course, if you then do a significant consultation over Christmas, then I'm sure Councillor Chegwin and others would very rapidly be criticising us for holding a consultation over the Christmas holidays. So the reality is that consultation is going to have to happen in January, but it will be exactly what I said to Councillor Chegwin and others at the Select Committee. It will be a very real, meaningful consultation, and it will look at options from which people can choose. And of course, there will be options relating to libraries across this county and how they work, how they could work in terms of hours. There will be options which would see no library closures whatsoever, but people will need to have a look at those very carefully, see how they suit their particular circumstances in the areas of the county in which they live, and they will have to come back to us with their responses, and I expect a big response. I know that in Essex, which is a much smaller county than Hampshire, they carried out a libraries consultation and said something like 21,000 replies. So I've got no doubt that people in this county are going to have something to say about the library service, but it has to sit within the context of two issues. One is £1.75 million needing to be saved from that service, and the other context is that reduction from 7 million visits annually to 4.5 million visits annually to those libraries. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McAvoy, please.
Right, thank you, Chairman. I will be brief. There's been a lot of criticism of the highways, especially from the Liberal Democrats. So I'd like to say to Councillor Humby, thank you for resurfacing all of Leap Road at Langley. Thank you for resurfacing all of Hampton Lane in Blackfield. Thank you for resurfacing Long Copse in Holbury. Thank you for completely resurfacing Limekiln Lane, Redistributor Road at Hardley, all within our well-managed budget. Also, thank you again for the wonderful lookout at Leap, again within our well-managed budget. So just compare and contrast with Eastleigh Borough Council. Current borrowing requirement of £363 million at a cost of £8,000 to every household in the borough. So really, it's a no-brainer. Quite clearly, I will be supporting these recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James, please.
We have to accept these cuts are ideologically driven. From central government, I accept, but they're ideologically driven. Cuts is something they want to happen. We are being forced by the Conservatives. There is no shortage of money. I distinctly remember hundreds of millions being found by central government to fund preparations for a Brexit that was going to happen on the 29th of March. It didn't happen. The hundreds of millions were wasted when, of course, they could have been much better spent in the local authority. Now, of course, that will be blamed on Remainers, but I do mention that Jacob Rees-Mogg voted against the withdrawal agreement as many times as Joe Swinson, and I don't think he's a Remainer. So let's not pretend that the Remainers blocked it. Of course we blocked it, voted against it. We were elected to do that. Actually, Leavers blocked the deal. Leavers blocked Brexit. The government then spent hundreds of millions of pounds again to get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October, because we're all going to leave by then or die in a ditch or something. I'd rather die than not leave. I think there was a statement made in one of the honest Boris Johnson moments, and we didn't leave. Hundreds of millions of pounds was found very, very easily, and we still didn't Brexit. And people who voted back in 2016 for the easiest deal ever, we hold all the cards, this will be easy, this will be simple, that's what they voted for. And I accept they won, and I accept we activated Article 50, and I accept we entered into negotiations. The fact they failed is the Brexit failure. It's the failure of the Brexit people, the Brexit MPs, that those deals have failed. We are now 3.5 years on. You've had your chance, you've blown it. We need to get on and fix social care. We need to stop spending money every 3 months on the next withdrawal of potential Brexit with no deal. We need to start spending that money on social care, NHS and things like that. So let's stop Brexit and get on with looking after people. Those who support this, those who support Brexit, do not care about people. They're only interested in Brexit. I was elected to support people, not some Tory wet dream. Thank you.
Members, if you got any concern, address the chair and ask that question. There's no point to have a difference of opinion is there, but we shouldn't be. We are all friends here. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to mention Brexit. I've tried very hard not to talk about it, but Councillor Perry started it. I was pretty ambivalent about Brexit in 2016. But those who say, and some have implied this morning, that a 52-48 difference, percentage difference, is too close to call, and therefore we need another referendum. And I just wonder, with elections coming up, we're going to be seeing 600 and odd people elected to Parliament and winning elections. Which of those results, how close do they have to be before the Liberal Democrats would say, well, actually, that wasn't conclusive. We need to rerun the election in that constituency. Is it 10 votes? Is it 50 votes? Is it 100 votes? Or will they take... I listened to you, Councillor Collett. Thank you.
Councillor, can I stop, please? I think we shouldn't be discussing the national politics here. Some other speaker has been talking, not to the county council, we're discussing the national government. I don't know why we're doing this. We have to mention something, but I think it is out of the context. We should be discussing what is before us. So please don't get into too much politics. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your guidance, Chairman, but I will just finish by saying that in wanting to rerun a referendum is putting what confidence and trust there is left in our democracy in this country at risk. And I would like to place on record that, ambivalent though I was about the whole thing, I identify as a Democrat. Now, let me turn to the proposals before us today. Members on this side seem to measure everything in terms of money. Now, yes, I know money's important and we have to balance the budget, but what about outcomes? Why do they measure everything by the amount of money that we spend on something rather than the outcomes we achieve? This council consistently, over many years, has delivered more for less. I'd like to take up something Councillor Simpson said when he talked about the reserves. People may have inferred from what he said that we have enough reserves to run the council for a year. It wasn't quite what he said, but can we just be crystal clear? We had it in presentations and member briefings last year. Free reserves could run this council for 27 days. The earmarked reserves we can't use. We can't stuff it under the mattress until we need it. We've got to put it somewhere, but it's not available for revenue spending. And Councillor Westbrook talked about his concerns about some of the equality impact assessments and some of the negative impacts. Those are do-nothing scenarios. And now we've identified those, we can work on how to mitigate those so that any savings proposals are implemented safely. And if he would like to meet with me to talk about any of his particular concerns, then I'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferras, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I wasn't going to speak, but I did feel I needed to reply to Councillor Collett's statement. So I'm really pleased you've come back into the chamber about demand prevention. I would like, first of all, to agree with the leader. We need a national solution to adult social care, and life isn't easy. But I would like to assure Councillor Collett that any member or resident of Hampshire who needs adult social care will receive it. And if you were listening to the gentleman who said the prayers today about Baraka, about making things go further or faster, we're making money go further and faster by investing in things that actually not only give us savings, but actually improve the lives of our residents. And you've heard me talk about them before. I will continue to talk about them and praise them because of the difference they do make to people's lives. I'm talking about shared life, supporting living, extra care, and our use of technology. All these things affect savings for adult social care, but the main thing is they improve people's lives at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. I just thought it was worth, very briefly, just referring back to the public consultation we ran about our financial strategy. And largely, the consultation, the public agreed with our approach to finances, targeting resources on vulnerable adults and children and using our reserves carefully. And I think that we do use them carefully, and that's what we based our strategy on. Thank you.
So, Councillor Dowden, please.
have been said. First, well, I'll try and shout because this doesn't work.
Support, I guess, yes.
Yeah, I think I need a bit more time. It's on now. Oh, is it? I want to, I hope the clock's only just started. I wanted to correct a few statements that have been made today. First of all, Councillor Perry, he talked about the Romsey improvements. Well, of course, yes, they are improved, and yes, I love them. But he also didn't state, of course, a lot of that was Section 106 money. In fact, 85% of that cost of that from developers' contributions. And, of course, Test Valley Borough Council. The second thing, Councillor Chedwin, he actually referred to the executive member for libraries, the last one, but of course he called him Councillor Cooper. Well, of course, it wasn't Councillor Cooper, it was Mr. Gibson there. And also Councillor Carew. I don't normally want to refer to Councillor Carew. I quite like the guy as an individual. But quite frankly, some of the statements he makes in here, what I've heard from him in the past, frightens me. I wonder what drug you're giving him. I don't know what it is.
Councillor, I think.
Well, it's
could you?
I wanted to raise the most important thing. Sorry,
Councillor
Chairman,
Dowden,
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
I think you should have apologies.
I apologise.
Thank you, Councillor.
What I wanted to say is the fact of that everybody's complaining, and I too are complaining, that people's services are being reduced in this county. But a lot of the problem is central government, not only from funding, but actually funding incorrectly. I've always argued with adult social care. For example, is a good example. NHS is suffering. Why is it suffering so badly? I'll tell you why. Because they've never funded adult social care properly, in which case we can look after people. Even extra care was a good example of that, which is something I supported right from the start. People are going into hospital. They're actually laying about in hospital, costing lots more money when we could be looking after them and prevention to prevent them going in the first place if we had the money. So I lay the blame with central government there. They're causing the problem for the NHS because of their mismanagement of where they're putting the money. So bear that in mind. So the Conservatives are not always clever, certainly not clever when it comes to money. The leader, I think, actually, to be fair to the leader, I think he's genuine in his belief to try and get more money. But the facts are, the DUP, they managed to get a lot more money from the government, didn't they, to prop them up. We had a lot of Hampshire MPs. What were they doing? What were they doing? They could have been like the DUP and managed to get a lot more money for this county, quite frankly. And don't, if it's another load of Conservatives that get in at the next election in Hampshire, well, don't rely on that, leader. I'm very sorry, but I don't think that you'll get it. And all I know with this budget, we have to live with it. Of course we have, in the situation we're in. But yeah, I'll
thank you.
Shut up now.
Thank you, Councillor
I'll shut
Dowden.
up because of the
Thank you. Councillor Humby, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to make a few comments on the waste and then on highways as well, as it was mentioned several times. I think what all of us would agree that recycling right across Hampshire needs to improve. What I want to do is make sure that Hampshire County Council is at the heart of that. And we can do that by working in partnership. I was at the same meeting and the project in Tenkra that Councillor Hughes was attended, and I think practically everybody around the table agreed that PI needs a complete reboot. We need to start again. 20 years ago it was fit for purpose, it isn't now. Things have changed, policies have changed. The amount of waste we produce have changed. The type of waste that we produce has changed as well. So I welcome the Leader's announcement on the additional recommendation, that we're going to sit down and discuss this with the districts and boroughs. And we did have a constructive letter from the districts and boroughs as well. And that has already started to happen. Stuart Jarvis and his team have already started to have conversations with officers all around the districts and boroughs. And I do believe that working together we can achieve that. However, we do need to do that quickly. I still have to make the savings across the whole department, and a good percentage of that will be through waste. So once we can see a determined effort by the districts and boroughs to understand that we need to do that, one area is trying to manage 11 different types of collection systems. It's confusing. We say about it's confusing for the public to know what to recycle. It's even confusing for the public to know what colour bin you should be putting it in sometimes. So we need to effectively look at how we collect waste right across Hampshire in a joined-up way. And I'm pleased with the Leader's announcements. And I do think there is a willingness amongst most of the authorities. And I would hope that they would all agree to do that. Just on the on the highways, yes, I did make a comment about managing a declining network. I also quite regularly attend Portcullis House and go up to central government, lobbying all our MPs, and also MPs through Transport for South East, right across the South East, because I represent Transport for South East as well, and kept making the point that over the last 20 years, and it is successive governments over the last 20 years, we were collecting £34 billion in transport taxes. Local authorities were receiving just over 40% of that. Over that 20-year period, we now receive less than 30% of that. So I would like to think, in a small part, that my lobbying, and along with the leader and other members as well, working alongside the LGA, the Government Transport Select Committee, cross-party, made a recommendation to government that we have a 5-year funding plan. And that's exactly what we've been asking for. We hope that will go through and be passed. I don't know the sums in that yet. But what it does mean, it gives me and the department certainty, and we could potentially front-load the work that we're doing on the highway. Because if we know we're going to get that regular income or investment over those 5 years, we can actually set down and borrow against that because we know we're going to get that revenue stream. So I would like to think that we are lobbying. We have made a change, and that is we will see the benefits of that as well. I'll just also mention, because I think Councillor Porter mentioned about walking, cycling and a transport network for sort of bus rapid transit as well. We have 2 funds I sit on the board of, and we've been helping the bids. It's the Transforming Cities Fund for Southampton and Portsmouth. Yet it is a cities fund. Potentially in Southampton, that's a fund from 75 million to 100 million. A good percentage of that will be used on Hampshire's network. In fact, we just issued a press release around Chandler's Ford and other areas. The Portsmouth City Council bid is between 100 and 200 million pounds for that very reason that Councillor Porter mentioned. We hope that we'll be successful with that bid. The areas of Fareham, Gosport and Havant will benefit from that bid as well. So through that lobbying, helping our partners working together, we hope to actually secure that funding for the network in Hampshire. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'm going to invite the Leader of the Council to sum up the debate, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be brief. May I start by agreeing with much of what Councillor Dowden said? Whereas I think the government are right to spend money, extra money, on the health service, as I said earlier, think that some of it at least should be directed in that area that, if you like, straddles social care with health care, because I think that would actually reduce
the demands and the pressure on the acute sector. Having said that, may I also assure him and other colleagues in the Liberal Democrat Party that I said I wasn't joining the Liberal Democrat Party yet or ever, just to make that absolutely clear. Too late. May I just refer briefly to a couple of comments that Councillor Westbrook said. Councillor Perry quite rightly pointed out that one of the problems we've had is the issues that we were left with when the coalition came into government, in terms of the books not being balanced and no money being left. So I think a certain amount, at least, of the blame for what's happened subsequently must reside with the last Labour government. And I'm also interested to note that in the Shadow Chancellor's statement today, there's a huge amount of mention about a great big fund for the north of England, but no mention about what's going to happen to local government in the south. So there is no reason to assume that we're going to get any more money in Hampshire from a Labour government than is the case at the moment. Councillor House made a number of points about how we could spend the money differently, or the whole process was not as it should be. I won't dwell on the point that Councillor Perry made so eloquently about the fact that we had a referendum and the result of that referendum, and you can't just dismiss it. But what I will say is this, is there is a tendency of the Liberal Democrat Party to make an awful lot of promises when they think they've got no chance of reaching office. And when they do, they find a lot of those promises are very difficult to keep. And the obvious one was the one to do with loans for students. I make that point because it's fine to say we can do things in a different way, but when you're actually trying to run the council, you've got to be realistic as to what's possible and what isn't. Having said that, I think this has been a pretty good debate. We've covered a wide variety of subjects. There's an awful lot of things we would like to do, but we can't. But what we do believe we've done is to ensure that the money we have available is spent prudently and carefully, and indeed, in the process of having to bear down on our expenditure, we have come up with new and innovative ways of delivering a good service right across the board. And I think that sums up what I would argue is the main strength of the Conservative Party here in Hampshire, is that we're realistic about what we can do, we're prudent in the way we use the money we have, and we develop really good results as a result of doing that. So finally, I would like to commend the recommendations in this particular motion to the House. And the Council, sorry.
Thank you, Leader. Now I'm going to put the recommendation to you, page 24, from A to M. Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Now, item 10, constitution matter, which is the Leader of the Council again. Is you constitution matter?
Yeah, I've just lost everything.
What do you want?
I'm asking the Council to agree this particular constitutional matter as it's written in the papers in front of you.
Which is the amendments to the Members' Allowance Scheme 2019 and 20, page 457 to 472, which is on the agenda, and it's page 58, the recommendation. Are you all agree? Agreed. Thank you very much. Now we are on the part 2 items, which is on the 12, Hampshire Fire Rescue Authority. So this item is for the question and debate. I'm going to ask the Councillor Westminster.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry.
I'm happy to present the report from Hampshire Fire and Rescue and take any questions that anyone may have.
Item 13, Executive Committee report. Councillor Mann, please. Leader of the Council.
These two reports on adult health and care and public health annual report are in front of you, and I will obviously take any questions you may have.
Thank you. And the public health. Councillor Grzeski, please.
Chairman, are we at 13B? Yes. Thank you. Yes. Well, I was pleased to sign this on behalf of the County Council. We've heard about it from Councillor Chowdhury this morning, and a strategy is being worked up. If anybody has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to present this part 2 item on demand management and prevention grants, which I'm sure Councillor Collette will be very pleased to see. Happy to take any questions.
Move on to D, which is Councillor Woodward, please.
I think it's
Chairman, I'm pleased to append the report.
He's done it. That's it.
agreed. It's agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We conclude the business for today. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Brilliantly chaired.